Hey everybody, so today we're gonna shake things up a little bit. I don't have a movie for y'all to review today. I was trying to come up with different video ideas for you guys, and I thought, what are some of the worst horror movies of 2024? Yes, this list will have spoilers in it. Doesn't matter, you shouldn't watch these movies anyways, they're pieces of shit. With that all being said, let's get into it. I have 5 movies here that I think are some of the worst horror movie offerings that we've had this year. If you disagree, that's okay, let me know down in the comments below, but I promise you probably won't. So to kick off our list, number 1, we have The Strangers, Chapter 1, directed by Renny Harlin. This film revisits the story of a young couple portrayed by Madeleine Petsch and Ferroy Gutierrez who become targets of masked strangers while staying at a remote vacation rental. Despite being a reboot of the 2008 classic, this movie failed to capture the suspense and terror of the original, largely due to predictable jump scares, the worst character decisions in a horror movie ever. These are some true dummies in this movie, and a lackluster plot that feels recycled and uninspired. While the movie had potential with its atmospheric setup and really eerie location, I love the forest in horror movies. It had a really nice, promising setup. The cast was led by Madeleine Petsch, and everything seemed to look like it had all the makings of a good horror movie. Unfortunately though, the film ultimately failed due to its cheap carbon copy version of the original, followed by uninspired execution. Don't even get me started on how they banged so hard on this movie doing so good that they planned a trilogy. Stop doing that. The central plot of the young couple terrorized by the masked assailants is a rehash of the 2008 original, but without the tension, emotional stakes, or the creepy cinematography that made the original so effective. The lack of character development also with the main characters further kills any of the horror, as viewers are given little reason to care about any of the protagonists' fate. Not to mention the pacing is erratic with long stretches of uneventful scenes followed by sudden bursts of violence that feel more like they were mandatory than genuinely there to frighten you. In the end, the film is just a hollow imitation of its predecessor, and in my opinion, it lacks the originality and fear factor that ultimately made the original a cult classic. Coming in next at spot number 2, we have The First Omen. Directed by Arkasha Stevenson, this prequel to the classic Omen series attempts to explore the origins of the Antichrist. However, it's brought down by a convoluted storyline and a lack of coherent direction. The movie struggles to build tension, and its reliance on CGI, over-the-top effects, and just weird artistic choices that take away from the psychological horror that made the original so iconic. It also struggles under the weight of its own ambition. It had the difficult task of living up to the legacy of The Omen while also simultaneously justifying its existence. Unfortunately, the film fails on all of those accounts. The narrative attempts to explore the backstory of the Antichrist, but instead of adding depth to the mythology, it complicates it with unnecessary subplots and a severe lack of focus. The acting isn't bad, but the characters are underwritten and their actions often feel contrived, feeling more like vehicles for the plot than real people with motivations and fears. The film's over-reliance on CGI effects for its horror sequences undermine the tension, and it makes the scares feel a lot more artificial and silly, trying way too hard to be disturbing with no substance. Additionally, the film's tone is inconsistent, bouncing between attempting to recapture the slow burn dread of the original and embracing more modern horror elements, resulting in a disjointed viewing experience. It's also worth to point out that the film's ending, which attempts to tie back to the original series, feels forced, severely forced, and unsatisfying. Ultimately, this just left me wondering why the film was even made in the first place. If you're in the mood for an Omen movie, just watch the damn original. Up next, coming in at spot number 3, we have In a Violent Nature, directed by Chris Nash. In a Violent Nature centers around the POV of a serial killer and his murder spree against a group of teens. Basically Friday the 13th, but from the POV of the killer. An intriguing premise, yeah, but the movie just falls flat due to its poor character development and a plot that fails to tie any of the elements together cohesively. The scares and gore are few and far between, and the movie's pacing issues further diminish its execution. The plot's convoluted and introduces very few ideas that in the end go nowhere, leaving the audience confused rather than intrigued and bored. Don't even get me started on all the unnecessary shots of walking that pad the movie's runtime. I just can't even talk about it. Then you have the characters who should be the emotional core of the story, regardless of the killer being the main character of the movie, POV, whatever. Anyways, the fact that these characters are so thinly sketched and lack any real development makes it extremely difficult for A, viewers to invest in their survival, and B, for viewers to invest in the movie at all, because I get it. I get the selling point, the gimmick, the POV of a serial killer, and we're gonna watch him murder people in gnarly ways. Cool. That is not what this movie is. It is very boring, super overhyped. The horror elements themselves are inconsistent, while there are moments of genuine tension and a few standout gore moments complete with practical effects. Everybody knows about the yoga kill. It's great. Either way, it ends up feeling more gratuitous than necessary. Then you got these like long, dull stretches where nothing happens that ruin any momentum for the story. The film seems unsure of what it wants to be. Psychological thriller, a slasher, or supernatural horror. It ends up being just a bland mix of all three. If you want a muddled and ultimately unsatisfying horror experience, this movie is for you. Coming in at spot number 4, we have A Quiet Place Day One. Now, I'm not sure if this technically counts as a full-on horror movie, but the way it was marketed to me and talked about, I'm gonna go ahead and consider it a horror movie for this list. Directed by Michael Sarnowski, this film is a prequel to the successful A Quiet Place series, showing the initial outbreak of the deadly alien creatures. This prequel is bogged down by an over-reliance on action sequences, making it feel more like a generic disaster into the world film than a tense thriller. And A Quiet Place Day One attempts to expand the universe of the original films by exploring the chaotic first day of the alien invasion. However, what made the original A Quiet Place film so effective was their use of silence and minimalism to build tension. This prequel unfortunately abandons those strengths in favor of more conventional action and disaster movie tropes. The characters, instead of being resourceful survivors, are often reduced to very two-dimensional stereotypes, making it very difficult to care for their fate. I love Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, but they barely talked in the movie, which I've seen minimal dialogue in a film executed very well. It was not here. The film also suffers from trying to juggle too many plot lines and characters without giving any of them depth that they need to be in order to be compelling. Critics and audiences have noted that while the film delivers on spectacle, it falls short on the actual suspense and character-driven storytelling that made the original A Quiet Place such a standout in the genre. Having seen both of the A Quiet Place movies now, I can definitely say I strongly agree with that take. Alright, finally, at the end of our list, we have the most recent movie that came out. Spot number 5 goes to Trap, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Trap stars Josh Hartnett as a serial killer at a concert with his daughter in a psychological horror film that attempts to blend social commentary with horror. Where was that movie? Falls into the trap of many Shyamalan films by shoehorning a twist ending that feels forced and unearned. Not to mention the film's slow pacing, lack of deaths, and shoehorned concert scenes ruin any effort made for this to be a scary movie. M. Night Shyamalan's Trap is a film that tries to be more than just a horror movie, but in doing so, it loses sight of what makes horror work, which left most of my theater frustrated and confused, me included. Really unclear what kind of movie they were trying to make here. The film's central concept has potential, but that's about as far as that goes. So much time building up and teasing that it neglects to provide an actual scare or development to any of its characters, especially the killer, or even bother to create a genuinely suspenseful atmosphere. As for the concert scenes, I didn't mind them too much compared to a few other reviews I've seen. Y'all are harsh. Some of the concert scenes were more enjoyable than the killer stuff, to be honest. But it definitely messed with the pacing. The slow and confusing pace, along with a bonkers third act that's more like a magic show, ultimately just left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I imagine everybody else that was in the theater with me. No on-screen deaths, no real chases or suspense. I was begging for this movie to end. Not even the twist with his wife setting the trap up could save this mess. Trap is a film that does too much and ends up doing very little right, resulting in a disappointing entry in Shyamalan's filmography. Shocker. So here you have it, 5 horror movies that came out in 2024 that were extremely miserable to get through and that I watched anyway, so hopefully you guys don't have to. You're welcome. Alright guys, well that pretty much wraps up this video. If you're new here, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. It'll really help the channel out a lot. And if you just want to go that extra mile, hit the notifications bell so you'll know whenever I post new videos. Next week I plan on releasing my X Trilogy ranking. Keep your eyes out for that. As always, thank you guys so much for your support. Don't forget to like and share, and I'll see you in the next one.